Urinary incontinence, that little pee that escapes when you laugh or cough or jump, is something that you should be paying attention to, especially as we go through perimenopause and menopause and our estrogen disappears. Those tissues that support your pelvic floor lose their elasticity, and sometimes strength training can exacerbate that. Today, I'm republishing an interview that I did with Jenn Lormand from Tighten Your Tinkler. Whether you're dealing with this right now or you don't have a single symptom, I think this information is something that every woman should have, because when you do have your first symptom, you want to nip it in the bud before it becomes a real problem. My guest today is Jenn Lormand, an exercise physiologist, published researcher, and co-founder of Tighten Your Tinkler. I mean, what a great name. Jenn has been living and thriving with stage 2 prolapse for over a decade. So she brings both deep expertise and real-world compassion to her work, helping women deal with pelvic floor dysfunction without invasive devices or endless Kegels. So what we talk about in this episode is why peeing when you exercise or laugh isn't normal, even if some fitness areas are trying to normalize it, and also some symptoms that you may have pelvic floor issues and you're not even peeing yet, and how recurring urinary tract infections can actually stem from pelvic floor issues. And the fact that if you've had problems already when you were younger, they're likely to get worse at this point. And the thing is that if you don't kind of nip it in the bud, you can expect that it will continue to progress and get worse. But there are things you can do today, and Kegels are actually not what she recommends. So listen to this episode to learn so much more about your pelvic floor. I was blown away by how much I learned. So listen to this episode today and get yourself educated. Let's get into it. All right. So, Jenn, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Lynn. I'm excited to be here.
So, I'm really excited to dive into this topic because I think this is something that a lot of women struggle with without ever talking about it. I mean, you even see on social media that there's a little bit of this trying to normalize that women leak when they're lifting heavy, like leak
Oh,
urine.
yes.
And, but I think that that is, yeah, something, well, I would love for you to talk more about that. And really, my audience is primarily women who are 40 plus, so they're in perimenopause and menopause. And that probably brings its own challenges to the pelvic floor space,
Yes.
and maybe things that have started earlier in life and haven't been addressed then might get even worse. I just remember, I mean, I personally don't have any problems, but actually, when I took your quiz, I started thinking, could there actually be some improvements that I could make, based on like all the questions that you asked that I was like, whoa, are these even related to pelvic floor issues? But my own personal kind of eye-opening on this was after I'd had my first child, I went to like a pelvic floor course, for postpartum women. And I was amazed at how many young women, younger than me, because I wasn't the youngest to be having my first kid, and they were talking about they had already had urinary incontinence like before they had the kids. So I think, yeah, so I'm really excited to open up this topic because I think it's probably something a lot of people struggle with and nobody's talking about.
Yeah. I mean, if you'd like, I'll jump right into the stats. Now, I
Yeah.
will say I don't know worldwide stats on pelvic floor dysfunction and pelvic organ prolapse, but I can tell you, just to define the population of women that we're actually talking about, statistically reported cases, it's 1 in every 3 women in the United States that are dealing with some type of pelvic floor dysfunction. And essentially, that is a very fancy diagnostic word for a lack of coordination of your pelvic floor muscles to perform the job that they're supposed to be performing. So, this can look different for a lot of different women, but essentially, in the US, we're talking about over 52 million women who are dealing with this. And just to give context to that number, we know how many women are struggling with breast cancer. That's about half of that number in the US. So this is a silent epidemic that has been happening for quite some time. And obviously, we'll zero in on the perimenopause population, because that is really a point in time in a woman's life where these issues get to the point where they can no longer ignore them anymore. So during perimenopause, and I'm just going to stay with the symptoms that are specific to the pelvic floor, the main things that can cause tissue issues, is how we like to refer to them, is that drop in estrogen. And so we see this as perimenopausal women. Many women think about wrinkles on their face, the lack of collagen. However, this impacts all of the tissues in our body, and that includes the pelvic floor tissue. And so when we start to lose that collagen, that is our natural elasticity. So let's say you had children, maybe later in life, which a lot of women are choosing to do now in your late 30s, and you did notice in that postpartum period, you did have some pee leaks when you were coughing, sneezing, laughing. But then over time, you notice, okay, they weren't as frequent, but let's say you get a cold and you're having to wear the poise pads and those kinds of things, because every single time you cough or sneeze, you're leaking. But as soon as the cold goes away, you can kind of manage. I mean, if you have a big sneeze while you're driving and you can't cross your legs or something like this, then you might have a leak, but it's nothing that really women will say impacts their quality of life, right?
Mm.
You might notice that you've, been dealing with back or hip tightness over the years. It kind of comes and goes depending upon the activities that you're doing, how sedentary you are. You just chalk that up to old age, right? You might notice that sex has become less exciting, we'll say. Maybe you notice there's less friction there. Or you might experience pain during intimacy, which we define as either, actual pain with insertion, which during perimenopause and postmenopause can actually be vaginal dryness, which is a separate issue than what we're going to discuss here. But you could notice you have pain higher up in the abdominals. Okay. This can be due to prolapse, that falling down of the pelvic organs, and it creates this plunger-like effect in the pelvis, which can create pain higher up. It can create swelling post-sex, soreness post-sex. Other women report dribbling pee during sex. All of these things are pelvic floor dysfunction, and a progression of pelvic floor dysfunction is pelvic organ prolapse. And so I do think that is an important thing to just say right off the bat, that these issues that you might have noticed, postpartum, these are a progressive issue. So if you do nothing, it will progress once you get to perimenopause, especially because you start having this compounding hormonal effect that everything just kind of seems to pile on at once.
Wow. Yeah. Just one more thing that the loss of the female hormones kind of does for you.
Yes.
So I had a couple of just basic questions because I'm really a novice at this. So one is that if I never had kids, will I not have issues? Like, is that something that only happens if you have had kids?
Yeah. So my business partner and I, she is a licensed physical therapist and I'm an exercise physiologist. We did a not so little thing of a 2.5-year medical research study to research validate our protocol. And we had 40 women walk through that protocol, 5 of whom had never had children and actually were formally diagnosed with a hypermobility issue, which is called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome formally. So this can happen, and we see a lot of women that have come to us who have not had children, but who have been diagnosed with some type of connective tissue disorder like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. EDS is the shortened version many people might have heard of, or they just know from a very young age they were hypermobile. They could do the party tricks with their shoulders and their fingers and turn their hips all the way out. Some women, kids were diagnosed with hyperplasia of the hips, right? Excessive internal or external rotation. All of those things can set you up for this, because our pelvic floor is literally what holds our guts up and in. There is no hard bony tissue that does this. It is all soft tissue. And so, if we have done things over the years, like played high impact sports, there was a study that was published 20 years ago looking at a high school cheerleading squad. Almost 100% of the girls had symptoms of pelvic floor dysfunction. None of them had had children. So it's a
Okay.
muscle group that is very important that we strengthen. However, over the years, we have learned that that means doing Kegels.
Yeah.
And Kegels can be a temporary solution, particularly if you are incontinent, like completely incontinent. It can be a way to begin to stimulate those muscles to turn on. But it's not a great long-term solution because our pelvic floor never works in isolation. Our pelvic floor works with our deep abdominals, our back extensors, our glutes, our hip rotators,
Oh my
and
goodness.
it coordinates with our respiratory diaphragm. And so each time we move, the pelvic floor should be subconsciously involved. Therefore, if we want it to function for us when we cough and sneeze and bend over to pick up a laundry basket and squat with heavier weights, we have to functionally train it to turn on subconsciously. And that's why Christina and I are very much against Kegels, very much against bracing of the deep abdominals and Kegeling, because it's counter to how those muscles are actually meant to function.
Okay, so that just had so many things in it that I'm like, oh my God, I want to hear more about this because, well, first of all, it was that it is actually a muscle, all right, or muscles that are going to hold
Yes.
you up or hold it up. And then I'm thinking about like how many of us walk around most of the time holding in our stomachs, which
Yep.
probably is like pushing down on that more. And
You
then
guessed it. Bingo.
yeah, and then I'm just thinking like about this that it should on its own subconsciously lift up. I mean, I've been an athlete like all through high school and college. I played field hockey and lacrosse and did strength training and running and everything. And I feel like at least I kind of use those muscles. I tense them a little bit whenever I exercise. Just I don't think about it anymore. Is that what you mean by that subconscious, or have I trained myself, or am I
You've
doing it
probably
wrong?
trained yourself to brace before you lift. And that's the way it's been coached for so long. And
Okay.
really, if you have a solid foundational strength in these muscles, you really shouldn't have to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I'll put a caveat to that. If you're lifting a tremendous amount of weight, you may need to brace in order to lift that safely and
Hmm.
not injure another joint. But typically speaking, we don't want to brace before we lift.
Okay. Okay. I had another question I was taking notes as you were talking there. So about the tissue issue, because during perimenopause and menopause, you have all kinds of things going on down there with the tissue changing because of the lack of estrogen. And one of them is women get urinary tract infections a lot more easily
Yes.
because I guess the urethra, it's like a little bit bigger, so the bacteria can get up there
Well,
more
there's a lot
easily.
more than that. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot
But
more than that going
yeah.
on because what happens is when estrogen drops, P frequency goes up. The other organ systems are trying to compensate. And so when things start to drop, okay, so you were talking about the urethra specifically. When those organs start to drop, urethra is the tube that's connected to your bladder that it helps you pee. That's how you pee. Well, as the elasticity of the tissues decreases, the bladder falls down
Mm,
onto the urethra. And so the way that I explain this is it's like a kink in a garden hose,
mm,
right? So you're not able to completely empty. Therefore, you have urine retention both in the urethra and the bladder, oftentimes. And when the urine is sitting there and becoming more concentrated, it becomes a bladder irritant.
mm.
Bacteria begins to overgrow. And so many women during this time end up with low grade, consistent bladder infections and UTIs. They then have to get on antibiotics, which then ruins their gut. And it is this downward snowball effect. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to give some holistic solutions to that we recommend. Um, Number one is get thyself a peri-wash bottle fill it with a couple tablespoons of Epsom salt and warm water, and irrigate each time you use the restroom. Each time you use the restroom, irrigate the area. That's going to help cut down on bacteria. Sitz baths are great each evening as well. Filling up your bathtub with just a couple of inches of warm water, adding some Epsom salt, and just soaking in that for 5 to 10 minutes. Taking regularly a supplement like D-mannose can have tremendous impacts if you've been having this. And I say this from experience because post having my second son via C-section, I had multiple UTIs to the point where when you have multiple UTIs, you stop getting the normal symptoms. So you stop having the burning, you stop having the discomfort. You might notice you have a little more urgency and frequency, but you don't have those same symptoms as someone who doesn't get UTIs more frequently. So making these couple things a regular part of your routine. For me, I have not had a UTI in over 9 years. And I was someone who was prescribed course after course of antibiotics, and putting these things into practice. Not pushing your pee out is another one, because if you push your pee out, that creates more urine retention in the bladder as well. And then the last tip that I would say is, if you don't have a squatty potty or some kind of toileting stool, please get one. This is for both peeing and pooping. This puts your body in an ergonomical place where the knees are higher than the hips, and it physiologically relaxes the pelvic floor. So women who might be struggling with UTIs typically have something called a hypertonic or over tight pelvic floor. This is still a weak pelvic floor. As you and I both know, a tight muscle is a weak muscle. However, what happens is, because it's tight, the sphincter that controls whether you're peeing or not starts to constrict during the act of peeing, or they find it challenging to begin the stream of urine because of this constriction. So getting a squatty potty and doing a forward lean with nice breath work can help get that flow of urine started. But obviously, these are some temporary Band-Aid strategies, but ultimately to get to the root of these issues, it is about functionally strengthening and balancing out the strength. Because going back to what we were speaking about earlier, if you've been bracing and Kegeling and thinking you're doing the right things, and unfortunately many medical providers are suggesting to women in perimenopause to do these things because they're reporting more pee leaks, and so they're trying to do their best. I don't ever like to throw medical providers under the bus, because you know better, you do better, and this is what they were taught. But functionally strengthening these muscles, which means not Kegeling, not bracing. We want these muscles to activate and work synchronously and subconsciously.
Okay. So many things right there. I have one of my very good friends. She is in a like a bladder infection, UTI, like cycle. She has them just all the time. And it's just awful. Like you said, can't get rid of them without the antibiotics, which of course just messes up your stomach. So just wanted to clarify on this. So the irrigation, that's basically that you're kind of rinsing the outside, right? Not putting anything in your vagina, just rinsing the outside.
It's not douching, correct.
Right.
I'm not recommending that, although, some providers might recommend that. That's not what we're recommending. What we do know is, if you look back even just 70 years ago, physicians used to literally prescribe salt baths to heal UTIs before antibiotics were around. And so that's longer than 70 years ago, but you get the point.
Yeah.
So making that a part of your regular routine. And look, sometimes women are also dealing with this because when you have prolapse, those vaginal compartments are collapsing into one another. So we've talked a lot about the pee stuff, but the rear side of the bowl and the rectal symptoms, oftentimes women who have a rectocele, that means the rectum is pocketing into the vagina. And so they are not able to completely empty the bowels. And so you can imagine the close quarters down there, how just like we were taught as little girls, wipe front to back, not back to front, because you don't want to get that bacteria in the urethra. It's very challenging for some of those women to not do that. And so there again, that's where the irrigation really does come into play to try to help
clean it. Yeah.
with that.
I live in Finland, and here using a bidet is very common.
It's very common.
And like every bathroom has it, and it's very like everybody knows how to use it. so
Yes.
And then
but using the salt really makes a difference.
Then you need to do the salt thing. Yeah.
Yes.
And then the squatty potty. So is that like the thing that came to mind is like when my kids were little, because I have two boys, we had like this little stool in front of the toilet and they would stand on there so they could pee, standing up. Is that basically what you're
It is similar to that. It's a stool. It's a toileting stool that essentially fits around the base of your toilet.
Yeah.
And the ergonomics that you're looking for is you should be able to get your legs shoulder width apart. Okay. And pants should come down below the knees.
Okay.
Because if you're not pulling your pants all the way down, then you still have tension on the muscles of the outer hips, and the pelvic floor won't be able to relax. So pants need to come down below the knees. Knees need to be higher than the hips.
Okay.
And ergonomically speaking, that helps allow the pelvic floor muscles to relax. Because keep in mind, the musculature that we're talking about here, I've got some little photos that I like. So we're talking about the pelvis. Many women get freaked out, but I like to show this picture of just what it looks like in your body. And then this would be like if you're looking down into your body, and you can see these are all the attachments of the pelvic floor. So it is a bowl of musculature that connects the hips side to side and front to back.
And holds you there. So that position that you're trying to get into reminds me very much of if you were squatting in the woods, right? You're going to pee like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So just to think of what it would feel like.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now maybe come to a few of the solutions. So, okay, if we assume that it's not the worst case scenario, because then, there are bigger things, but if you've got well, first of all, actually, it would be really nice to get like an actual definition of prolapse, because I don't think I know exactly what the definition is, and then how to start handling these. Yeah.
Yeah. So prolapse is essentially a continuation of pelvic floor dysfunction. Okay. So pelvic floor dysfunction is simply the pelvic floor muscles are not working in a coordinated fashion the way that they should be. So, this can be an onset of you can have pee leaks, pee urgency, back and hip tightness, pain with intimacy. All of these things can also just be symptoms of pelvic floor dysfunction. Okay, that's how it starts. I will say for women in their late 40s and 50s, we also get to the point of sometimes having a joint replacement, like a hip replacement. That can have negative consequences on the pelvic floor because of what we just talked about, where the insertion of those muscles are in the hip joint. And so, some women report, I was fine, I had this hip replacement, or I had this hip injury, or I had this back injury, and now all of a sudden I'm having all of these bladder or bowel or both symptoms. Okay, so just trying to get the bigger picture here.
It is really a system that we're looking
correct.
Yeah.
So those can be triggers or the impetus for pelvic floor dysfunction and pelvic organ prolapse, which again is a continuation, a progression of pelvic floor dysfunction. And that is simply, when we look at the organs in the pelvis, this is the normal position here. Okay. So you can see bladder, urethra, here's uterus, vaginal opening, here's rectum. Okay. So this is normal position. When those organs begin to fall down and then collapse into one another, that is pelvic organ prolapse. And there are 4 grades of that, stages 1 through 4. Stage 0 means no prolapse. If you're, going in for a diagnosis, which in the US, it would be a urogynecologist who would make this type of diagnosis. Oftentimes you need a referral to get there in the US. I know Finland's medical system is set up much differently than ours. But stages, and you were mentioning the quiz in the beginning of our conversation, and I would highly recommend, we have a free quiz. It is based off of the medical research that was published in 2 different journals here in the US. And it's based off of that data. Excuse me. And so the ones that we're able to help with our online DIY program, our signature program, is stages 0 through 2.
Okay.
We know we're a great fit for that. Stage 3 is usually where women will start to need the assistance of something like a pessary. It's like a device, little scaffolding that is inserted into the vagina to hold up the pelvic organs that the
Okay.
woman would put in when she's going to be on her feet for longer periods of time to
It's like a
assist in that
bra for your.
downward, essentially. But it can be a challenge to find one that is
Oh,
comfortable.
I can imagine. Yeah.
um so that's stage 3. And then stage 4, unfortunately, women are a better candidate for surgery, because at that point the tissue has really gotten stretched to the max, where the organs are actually bulging out of the vagina, the
Okay.
full length of the vagina. So
So what is that feel? I know some women, and I've had this feeling before, where it almost feels like something's pushing down from within the
yes,
vagina. Like,
yes.
what is that then?
Yeah, so those feelings of pressure are symptoms of prolapse. And so this can feel, women report this very differently, because just to be clear, each case of prolapse is unique. There are no 2 cases of prolapse that look or feel the same, because
Okay.
we all have unique bodies. But this is feelings of downward pressure, like think of end stages of pregnancy. Many women report when they are having a bowel movement, perhaps they feel a bulging sensation, or they actually see the organ when they bear down for a bowel movement. They notice that something is coming out of the vaginal opening. This can also feel like you start to question, wait, do I have a tampon in? It
Mm.
feels like I might have a tampon in incorrectly. Or you realize maybe you were using tampons during your cycle, if you are still menstruating, even in perimenopause, and you're not able to get the tampon to stay in.
Okay.
The other feelings of pressure can be more in the lower abs, more in that lower pooch. And that's again because of that downward falling. Sometimes the organs fall more anteriorly, the bladder and the uterus.
Okay, so if one is having any kind of symptoms, and it sounds like probably a lot of people are feeling at least some of these symptoms, is it like we should start doing something about it and not ignore it any longer? Because it sounds like we definitely don't want to get to stage 3 or 4 if we can help it.
Correct. Yeah. And like I think it's really important for women, because as women in general, we tend to be caretakers of many, and we tend to end up on the bottom of the list.
Mm.
And this is the time of life. And I feel like, that is coming to the forefront currently, where it is really important. If you haven't been putting yourself on your list, do put this at the top of the list, because it is progressive and it isn't going to go away if you ignore it. And what I mean by ignoring it is maybe it's more of an acceptance. It's more of an acceptance of throwing in the bladder props and the pee pads or the poise pads
Mm.
into your cart every other week, and
Yeah,
just accepting this is what's going to happen. You don't want to do that, because it
no.
will continue to get worse. And so simply by, we have some great freebies on our website. We have an entire resource page that when you click on it, you scroll down a little bit, we have all these green buttons, and it's all the different issues. And when you click on a particular issue, we have blog posts, YouTube videos that we've done, and freebies that we have that are associated with that particular issue. So we have a 90-90 decompression that we teach, which is fantastic for helping to alleviate some of these symptoms. Again, these are short-term fixes. If you're looking for a long-term fix, you really need to get to the root of it, which is functionally retraining these muscles to work subconsciously and synchronously.
So tell me a little bit about what that looks like, and is that something that, if I was to focus on doing that for, let's say, the next 12 weeks, would that
Yep.
be then kind of done and I don't need to worry about it anymore? And how much
Great
time does it
question.
take and all this? Yeah.
Yeah, those are great questions. So, the protocol that we teach in our signature program is the protocol that we developed and research validated in the medical research. And we walked women through a triplanar movement sequence, along with using some of the recovery tools that we do give away free on our website that I just mentioned. And it is meant to functionally strengthen the pelvic floor, the deep abdominals, the back extensors, hip rotators, and glutes, working with the entire pelvis and core foundational muscle groups, because those are all the muscles that work together to support your guts up and in. Now, in terms of whether you can do it for 12 weeks and then be done with it, that really depends on where you fall on the spectrum. You know, if you have something as simple as you're just starting to notice these symptoms and you take the quiz and you fall in our green zone, you can more than likely do the protocol for 60 to 90 days and then utilize it more on an as needed basis. If you take our quiz and you fall in the gold zone, the high gold zone, this is probably, well, first of all, you more than likely have some degree of prolapse, and it will require some regular maintenance. Now, the great news is the protocol that I'm talking to you about can be done at home, 10 minutes a day. You don't have to sweat. We call it your new daily warm-up because for active women, you would do this to turn on and activate those foundational muscles before you went for your lifting or your higher intensity cardio sessions, because you want to get these muscles on board like we talked about. Yeah. And so, you know, I always liken it to, because Christina and I talk all the time about your pelvic floor is not a magical unicorn as much as we want it to be. It is regular skeletal muscle tissue, much like the biceps, the triceps, the shoulders. Yeah. And therefore, we get women to think about, if you know, you're starting to notice you have pain and clicking and popping in your shoulder, you go get some imaging done and you find out you have a partial tear and you're like, I don't want surgery. I don't want to have to take pain pills for the rest of my life. Let me rehab this, right? Let me do a protocol that's going to help me restore range of motion, decrease pain, and all of these issues. There's the recognition that you're going to have to do some maintenance on that to maintain and keep that level of function. As with any, right? If we give up lifting for 6 months, we're going to expect to lose some gains. If we stop with our cardiovascular program for 6 months, we're going to lose some gains. And your pelvic floor is no different.
Okay. But there is some hope that you do a little bit more intensive period, and then it's like a maintenance.
Yes, correct. Okay. Correct. Yes.
Are these like movements like I'm just thinking, because you said they're not Kegels, and I was investigating your website. There's nothing you insert or anything like that.
That's correct.
It's some kind of actual like movement.
Yeah.
Kind of like
so it's got 3 components to it. There's a standing series, a bridge series, and planks. But again, it's completely different than those that you would think of, because you're moving in a triplanar fashion. We also use an external exercise tool that was developed by another physical therapist. Those 2 things are really the secret sauce, and pairing it with the recovery tools that we teach. Many women that come into the signature program are like, give me the exercises. And it's like, well, it would be like, every time you go to do the shoulder movement, you have pain. Well, you probably need to ice and heat first and then do the exercise, right? You need some recovery tools to stop the issue so that then you can move through the movement to strengthen it. Much the same way with the pelvic floor, we have these recovery tools where we teach diaphragmatic breath work, self-adjustment positions, pelvic organ decompression, potty positions, all of these things to help alleviate the issue so that it's not on fire where you're trying, when you start trying to move, it produces pain or invokes more issues. But that's really it. And one of the things that, quite honestly, why we research validated it is because it is so simple. And that's what women come back and tell us. They really appreciate how simple it is, that they can actually fit it into their lives. It doesn't feel like, the same as when you are prescribed physical therapy and you have to drive to an appointment, you have to get there 3 times a week and it's 60 minutes there. It just feels so much more doable to do it in your own home, and to really, once you learn the exercises and the recovery tools, you're talking about 10 to 20 minutes a day, depending on what you have going on.
Okay. So if somebody who's listening to this podcast today is like, wait a second, I didn't think I had problems, or I've just gotten so used to this, maybe I do have a problem, then I guess the first step is to go to your website and take the quiz.
Take the quiz. I mean, if anything is resonating today, that quiz is really where we always direct folks, because it's going to tell you if this is a good fit or not. And if you do score in the red zone, we don't just say, oh, well, sorry, we can't help you. You're linked to a page of referrals to other practitioners that we refer to personally who can help with getting to the next step in your healing journey.
Okay.
But
And
I can't say enough. If something in your gut, your intuition tugged at you listening to this conversation, don't ignore that, because when you get to that stage 4, unfortunately, you really are the best candidate for surgery. And I personally was referred to for surgery, a full pelvic floor suspension at the age of 36. And that's part of why this program exists, because at that moment, I felt like I had nothing to lose and everything to gain when the surgeon looked at me in the eye and said, I really don't like doing this surgery on women that are as young as you, because in another 10, 15 years, you're going to have to come in and do it again. And there's a 25% failure rate on the surgery. Don't wait.
whew, all right. Well, definitely. I think I'm going to be looking into that. Also, as I almost feel like, maybe I should do this also just in case, right? To strengthen it,
It will
right?
not hurt
Kind
you
of as a
at all.
prevention.
And actually, I mean, look, this protocol I used with my 2 older boys when they were teenagers. It helped them tremendously in sport because it also increases speed, agility, quickness. My
Oh,
husband had a disc injury, used it with him to help strengthen his core and alleviate back pain. So, I mean, yes, we get messages actually in our inbox quite frequently from members who have told us, my husband, is having some back pain. This helped me so much. Will it help him? And we always say, yeah, get him, let him watch, have him go through the movement sequence. Now, we don't sell directly to men because we also have a private community associated with our signature
mm,
program where we have an OBGYN nurse in there coaching. And Christina and I also pop in there weekly, both to respond to comments, but also monthly to do a live coaching in there. And it's an all women's group because we
yeah,
are discussing very intimate personal
yeah.
details. But this is fantastic if you're looking to, perhaps, you are noticing when you're exercising that all of a sudden you feel like you have to use the restroom as soon as you start to jump or as soon as you start to lift heavy, or you're noticing that, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I just leaked pee when I did that squat, right? Those are all signs and symptoms of your body starting to wave that red flag, to say, hey, please help me out here. This is not normal.
Okay. Wow. So this has been super, super helpful. How about if you share your website and also the coupon code
Yeah.
for people that want to get
Yes.
started?
So for your listeners, we have a custom coupon code. If they come and take the quiz, they feel like this is a good fit for them, and they purchase our signature program, they get $50 off. And the coupon code is Lynn Fit, all in caps. So that's LYNNFIT.
And I'll put that in
You can also head over to our website. We have a ton of resources there. If you are a visual learner like myself, we have hundreds of videos on our YouTube page where we discuss all the things, breaking down the different types of incontinence and urgency and anatomy lessons specific to prolapse. I would encourage you to go there. It's Tighten Your Tinkler on YouTube. And then we have a lot of fun and great content over on our Instagram page, and that's tighten.your.tinkler.
Wow, this was amazing. I feel like I don't think I've learned this much in this little time. I can't remember when. Not even in college. So so thank you so much for joining. I'm sure this has been super valuable for my listeners also. And all the information and the links will be in the show notes. So head on over there, take the quiz, get the free resources, join the course if you need help. I mean, let's not let it get worse. Certainly, it sounds like definitely something you want to nip in the bud.
Thanks so much for having me, Lynn. This was really fun.
Thank you for coming.